Restream. All right, everybody. Good afternoon. If you are on East Coast time, good morning. If you are on West Coast time, my name is Thomas Dimitrovich. Today's topic is on storm recovery resources, and I have with us Tim McClintock in the background, and it all starts now. All right, Mr. Tim McClintock, welcome to IAEI News Live. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for everything you do for the electrical industry. Today's topic is storm recovery resources, and this is near and dear to NEMA's heart. I know that, and your heart and others. Why don't you give yourself some time to give a little introduction, talk a little bit about yourself and what NEMA is and does.
Thanks, Tom, and good afternoon or good morning for those on the West Coast. Again, I'm Tim McClintock, and I am NEMA's Midwest Technical Field Rep. I'm one of 4 field reps with NEMA, and prior to joining NEMA, which I joined NEMA just a little over 2 years ago, I worked for 8 years in the regional operations at NFPA. Before that, I worked 16 years as an AHJ in Wayne County, Ohio, and got my start with working with the tools as an electrician for about 9 years back in the 1980s, which seems like forever ago. But the field reps, our regions are actually aligned with the 5 U.S. IAEI sections. The region where I'm at is the western section. I covered the 17 states in that section. NEMA field reps monitor state code adoption and other regulatory issues as they relate to the scope of products within NEMA within each of our respective regions. We also assist AHJs and end users with product application and code requirements. And as Tom mentioned early on, that the focus today is on storm recovery resources. You know, in addition to supporting code adoption and product application, the field reps also serve as a resource and coordinate with local officials whenever a disaster like Hurricane Ida strikes. NEMA also offers storm recovery resources to help educate electrical workers, first responders, and other local officials to help prevent injury from fire, shock, and electrocution. And you know, this topic couldn't be any more timely with the devastation that we saw last week with Hurricane Ida, that not only took its toll on you know, the southern state of Louisiana and to a lesser degree in Mississippi, it made its way up through the you know, the northern states and wreaked havoc with some extensive flooding in the northeast section. So ultimately, you know, Tom, I don't know where we can maybe provide some web links.
Yes.
But ultimately, you know, the resources that I'm just going to discuss and brief here this afternoon can be found by visiting NEMA.org, storm-disaster-recovery, and then /storm-recovery-resources.
So it was NEMA.org/storm.
Yeah, probably the easiest way to do that is go to NEMA.org and just type in storm disaster resources.
Oh, okay.
Or storm disaster resources might be the best way to locate that.
Let's just do a quick search. NEMA resources available before, during, and after a storm.
No, that's an article.
Okay.
So yeah, you could go to the article. And actually, those links are included in that article as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was an article that you recently wrote, actually, right?
Yes, last week, kind of summarizing, you know, the resources that NEMA offers.
Yeah, excellent. And we got Vince Delacroce out there, David Englehart's peeking in on us today, and William Snyder. Thanks for joining us, guys. If you guys had any questions on storm resources, please put them in the chat box. Leverage the chat box. We are live right now, so you never know what's going to happen, right, Tim?
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't said it any better. So, again, I'm not going to walk through each individual resource that's available here, but just a couple that I do want to highlight. And the first one there is the Evaluating Water Damaged Electrical Equipment. This is a free publication that provides guidance on handling of electrical equipment that is exposed to water. It outlines items that will require either the complete replacement or there is some cases where that equipment can be reconditioned by a trained professional. And I know, Tom, I believe you had covered reconditioning equipment in another segment on here. So again, another tie to that. But I can't say it enough. Always make sure you reach out to the manufacturer of that specific equipment when in doubt, or when you feel that either the equipment can continue in service, or ultimately if it's going to need to be reconditioned, even if it can be reconditioned. But that guide actually provides several examples. There's actually a table in there that will tell you what type of equipment is permitted to be reconditioned and what isn't permitted. And that document was actually just updated last year to incorporate the changes that occurred in the 2020 edition of the NEC, as we saw those changes occur.
Hey, Tim.
But ultimately, yeah.
So you're saying which one was just updated? Was it the water damaged one, or was it the reconditioning policy?
Both.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2019, is the latest version of the water damaged equipment.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. I just downloaded it. Yeah, 2019. Yep, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, and I see there's a link here to the NEMA policy on reconditioned electrical equipment, which I think you were speaking to. So both of these, and there's a table in here that talks about equipment replacement, or maybe reconditioned. So both this document and the reconditioning document are both now aligned with each other, and they're aligned with the National Electrical Code 2020 version, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Yep. And okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I got those two references right.
Yeah, nope, you were spot on with that. So yeah, ultimately the equipment that's covered under this guideline would include electrical distribution equipment, motor circuits, power equipment, transformers, wire and cable, flexible cords, wiring devices, as well as GFCI surge protectors, lighting fixtures, ballast motors, and other electronic products. Now, I'll put a plug in again for the NEMA Field Rep program. Last year, the Field Rep program actually put together a YouTube video that takes a deeper dive into how to apply this evaluating water damaged electrical equipment. And it was actually, when you were on the Field Rep page there, there's actually a link right there.
Oh, right there. Okay, so
to that YouTube video. So yeah, you don't want to run it now, but whenever you get a little bit of time, it's almost an hour, and we take a systematic approach into applying that guideline.
I like it. So that's okay. So this is approximately 49 minutes. Yeah, 49 minutes. Okay, perfect. Perfect. And now what's this one here? This is another video, NEMA 250 enclosures, environmental conditions, and enclosure types. So that's another, especially in when you're dealing with weather and putting electrical equipment outside, That's another great reference for you.
Selecting the right enclosure for whatever the environment is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Excellent. So there's 4 NEMA field reps that do something similar to what you're doing, right? You've got Mike's out on the West Coast. There's your
I cover the
mug.
Midwest. Brian Holland covers the southern region. And Brian is also the senior technical field rep. And so one of his responsibilities is to follow the storms in relation to like hurricanes. So he takes the lead role with that activity in the field rep program. And then finally, Jack Lyons, last but certainly not least, from the Northeast region. And so, yeah, we are all here available as a resource for you.
That's great, and I like the website. So I believe the links that you were talking about, I put them down in the description for this event. So there are a series of links in there to everything that we've just talked about. And I believe the NEMA field rep link is in there. If it's not, I will make sure I put that in there because it has all 4 of you guys' contact information. I know that you know, this video is up on the IAEI's YouTube site, so anybody across the country can watch this and reach out if they have questions on topics like this from a storm recovery issue, and then also any reference documents. Because what I've seen, Tim, and I don't know what your experience is on this. Usually, you know, after an event, you get into the debate or the discussion with an insurance company and trying to determine what needs to be replaced, what doesn't need to be replaced. And then there's the debate of what will be covered, what will not be covered, and things of that nature. So these resources, I think, will help everybody all the way around understand the details associated with and the hazards associated with trying to get something that is water damaged back up and running without properly addressing the concerns.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool beans. And go ahead.
Yeah, so just some other resources that are included in the storm recovery resources page are not necessarily related to water damage, but we also have some guidelines in there for fire and heat damaged electrical equipment. So thinking in terms of, you know, all the wildfires out west, NEMA has those guidelines. Likewise, evaluating earthquake damaged electrical equipment guide. So 2 very valuable resource tools that you have at your disposal.
Yeah. And so you know, the fire and heat damaged electrical equipment, I know I was at a couple homes or a few homes that had internal fires due to, you know, it could have been anything, could have been, you know, cooking fire or whatnot. And the question that's always been posed to me, or was in those 2 instances at least, were what do I do about this? These receptacles that obviously, or these light fixtures that obviously received damage because you could see the soot and the smoke. We didn't know how much heat they did experience, but this resource will help in those applications as well. Not in addition to the wildfire and all the other good stuff. It could be an internal fire that was in one part of the room, that the smoke, because with smoke and with soot, debris is carried. And when you put those on conducting materials and aspects of an electrical product, it may not manifest itself immediately. It might take some years to demonstrate the ramifications of that event.
Yep. No, great point. And likewise, jumping back over to the water damaged electrical equipment, you know, while the focus with this is hurricane or flood damage, you know, as a result of Mother Nature, you could have water damage as a result of some other catastrophic event.
Yeah.
Maybe a busted sprinkler line.
Well, you know, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I have personal experience here. I had a frozen pipes up above my garage. I had moved down to St. Louis, and then we were down there for maybe a month. And we found out that we had a busted pipe due to frozen pipes. And we had about, I think it was 48,000 gallons of water come down through the house. And So I had my contractor in, and he said we were looking the panel boards. Tim, I had water coming straight down through the panel boards. I mean, it was not looking good. I had hired a local electrician here to come and take a look at it, and they made it safe for me. But I was talking to the contractor, and he said that the insurance probably will not cover replacement of those panel boards and the circuit
Really?
breakers. Yeah, and I was surprised. So the first thing I did was I downloaded the water damaged NEMA document. I had that, so when my adjuster came to the house, she came walking in, and I had all of these documents ready. And I'll tell you what, we got down to the. She says, "I want to start in the basement." She walked over to the electrical panel, and we looked at the panel together. There were two panels there, and she says, "We'll replace both of those." And I was like, "Wow, I didn't even need to use this, but I was ready. I was ready for a fight or an argument." But I had absolutely no problems, and the contractor was delightedly surprised as well. So, but that is a point of this debate and discussion with regard to, like I had my can lights. They didn't replace the can lights in the house, right? So I was like, well, should I replace them? How much damage is too much damage? My conductors, and I know I had talked to Southwire at the time. I made a phone call to Dave Mercier, and I'm like, what do I do about my conductors? And he's like, well, as long as it wasn't a flood, water over top of that is not it's the wicking back up into that conductor. So there are a lot of little details that you should always contact the manufacturer. Absolutely, because I mean, I don't make cable or conductors, and so my call to a guy like Dave Mercier or to Southwire, which I could have reached out to you, right, and I could have contacted my NEMA rep, but it just so happened my Rolodex already included somebody. But the guidance was impeccable and very vital, because if you think about it, especially if you're going through it, if you're the electrical contractor, being able to help the homeowner through a very emotional time of house damage, right? Because like I just look at my personal experience. I lost personal belongings and memories and things like that. Photo books and all those good stuff. So I'm dealing with that aspect of it, and I had to deal with the other aspect of the equipment damage. But having a NEMA field rep, having your electrical contractor or the inspector, to David Engelhardt's perspective, he says he's got to download his latest version. He has the 2012. It's important that we help our customers with that during those difficult times, and you got to think for them, basically, right? As the inspector or as the electrical contractor, knowing the hazards and being disassociated from the emotional aspect of the installation issue, you can give good advice to say, here's what you need to replace, here's what you can refurbish or recondition, and how to address it. So these resources are absolutely very important from a safety perspective and a relationship perspective.
Yep, and ultimately, that's the role of the field reps. While we may not be able to say yes or no, I mean, we can refer to the guide, but ultimately, we are going to help put that person, that affected party, in contact with the manufacturer of that equipment. And then that's what, we're there to support that effort.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think it's very valuable because, like I said, I think there's at times like this, you take a look at what's going on at portions of our country right now. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of when you add emotion to a catastrophe, the decision-making process is challenged. If you just think personally, when a person gets emotional about something, you're not necessarily thinking logically, and relying on resources like this to get your mind into a logical process of understanding. Like what I really like about the NEMA guide for water damage are the tables, because they're really focused on the type of equipment. So you're looking at a panel board. Now you have to understand what a panel board is and what a molded case circuit breaker is, all these other good things. but this table will very quickly tell you what cannot be reconditioned and what may be able to be reconditioned. So if I had a switch or I had busway or a molded case circuit breaker, I'm not even going to think about it. I know I got to replace it. But if I had panel board or a switchboard, I may be able to go back to the manufacturer, or another publication like this has references PB1 and PB2 to say, give me further information on what I would need to do to be able to recondition that.
Well, and with, you mentioned the molded case circuit breakers, even though, let's say it gets submerged in water and,
Yeah.
the technician goes in and dries the breaker off and everything looks good. But what you can't see is the water that got inside where all of those, the contacts or the electronic components, and it may work fine now, but a couple of months down the road when corrosion starts to have an effect, then you're gonna have problems. So yeah, I mean, you can't see inside of that circuit breaker.
Yeah, and they're riveted together. So the moment you pop a rivet to look inside, now you've
destroyed it.
You've destroyed it, exactly. And I'll tell you, when we get as manufacturers, and you know this as well as I do, that when you have a product and you say, hey, I want to return this under warranty for whatever reason, and it goes back to the manufacturer, whichever manufacturer it is. And every manufacturer does things a little differently, but they may do a sampling and take the devices apart to try to understand what the failure was. And I'll tell you, I know I have seen images from our warranty departments where they've taken the breakers apart and it's rusted inside, and you can see debris from water. Because the other thing we forget about is that when water passes through, it's not just water. There's other materials.
It could be sewage.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you think about, like in my basement, I had water coming down through my walls, right? So there was, it went through insulation. So I had probably debris from insulation. It could be the fine fibers from the insulation, plus the dirt, which when that gets on a piece of metal and then it dries, it becomes conductive. And it's another source of a potential problem within that product. So, and that's why some products can be reconditioned and some can't, because you just don't want to take it apart to find out what's wrong. So, yeah, that is a challenge. Jody Wages says, "Oh, David Clements is online. Great presentation, very timely. Thanks, David, for joining in." And Jody says, we are constantly having to remind folks that you should not use WD-40 on water damaged circuit breakers. Oh, and when they put it, and that's, that's another really good point, because when, WD-40, you know what the WD stands for, is water displacement. So, and a lot of people think that, hey, I'll just spray this, clean it off, or I'll get some cleaner, clean the bus bar off. They don't realize they're introducing even more hazard, more contaminants to the picture, which is ungood. That's a technical term.
Ungood. Okay.
Ungood. Yeah.
So, Tom, also some other resources that we have on that web page actually points to the Electrical Safety Foundation International. They've got a really, really helpful document that's titled Safety Tips for Down Power Lines. Because ultimately in a storm scenario, whether it's a hurricane, tornado, what have you, there is always that risk that you're going to have down power lines, which, creates an inherent risk for somebody coming up upon that. So some really useful tips on, when you do happen to encounter down power lines to, stand clear on that. And so I see you're bringing that up on the page there. So and really this is geared kind of towards the homeowner. It's very simple, straightforward, but extremely important to follow all of those safety tips.
Tim, the challenge in the power lines, and I'm just speaking until I became more aware, anytime I saw a line that came from a telephone pole to the ground, I was always told, oh, those are just phone lines.
Yeah.
And, and because it's a telephone pole, right? So
Yeah.
as a kid, everybody
It's
called
a
them,
utility pole.
right.
Call it a utility pole.
It's a utility pole, not a telephone pole, because it got the telephone pole because of the first introduction of those. But I know when I was a kid, I was always told that those are telephone poles. So when I saw down lines, I assumed they were telephone lines, but that's not true. There are telephone lines up there, but
And it may be a telephone line,
sure.
but we, the message that we send out is err on the side of safety.
Exactly.
And when you have a down line, stay completely clear of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you don't know if a power line elsewhere fell on that phone line and maybe energized that phone line.
That's right. And you know what we talk about in 70E, we talk about the qualified person who can recognize the hazards. And the challenge with some of this equipment is you have to understand the equipment to be able to recognize the hazards. So because I'm not a utility guy and you're not a utility guy, I mean, you worked in and around that. So you probably have a much more awareness of what's on those poles than I do, or other people do, especially homeowners don't know. And you've got to, if you don't understand it, then the best bet is to stay away. And they have a distance here of 35 feet from a down power line. And that's because of the voltage potentials, right? So you can have step potential and still have shock issues of the current flowing through the ground. So you can have step potential issues. So great resource.
Yeah, another very helpful tip is they also have a document on generator safety. And I just want to spend a moment talking about this, not so much on the electrical side. Obviously there's requirements that we need to be aware of on the electrical side, whether it's, the transfer switch, having a transfer switch, proper cords, GFCI protection, and all that. And it's outlined with this. But one of the key pieces, and this actually emerged once again with Hurricane Ida, is the problem with carbon monoxide poisoning and ventilation, proper ventilation. You can go, go into Google and Google it.
Yeah.
Carbon monoxide poisoning, Hurricane Ida. And, unfortunately, there was a family of 3 that perished as a result of, and they actually went out and bought this brand new generator. But they didn't have proper ventilation. I'm not sure if it was located inside the home or was located close to a window. But at any rate, unfortunately, that family perished as a result of that carbon monoxide poisoning. So, while, we're always focused on the electrical side, we also have to keep in mind there are other hazards that come into play. So, as we dealt with the hurricane itself and the devastation that it brought, here we are a week later, and there's still ongoing hazards that exist with that. And right. That's the goal of all of this resource material, is to help educate the public on what those hazards are and how to take the necessary steps to avoid those.
Yeah, and what I think, in my opinion, I think about like my HVAC guy who comes to the house and people I contract with, right? He leaves packets of information for me about maintenance, about, the importance of changing my filters and things like that. These documents are 1 or 2 pages, and they have a lot of the statistics, and there's a lot of great information. An electrical contractor or an electrician who does, say, service calls for homes and whatnot, to take this, print it out, which is not that expensive, to have some of these sheets to say, look, I'm going to put these into a little folder, or I'm just going to hand them to the homeowner to say, hey, here are things you should be thinking about, especially if you see they have a generator, or even if they don't. Generators, testing of the GFCIs and things like that are things that we can share with the general public as an electrical community that'll raise the awareness right, of the hazards and some of the solutions to the homeowner. It could be the wife of the house, could be the father of the house, the kids, everybody associated. If they had access to this, now you don't guarantee they're going to read it, but to say, hey, you did your service call, you showed up, you get done with the work, you're saying, okay, thanks, ma'am, here's the bill, and oh, by the way, I've got some service, some information for you on electrical safety for your home, and you share that with them. If they at least looked at it and said, boy, you know what, there's generators, portable generators, carbon monoxide, boy, look how many people die from carbon monoxide, and they throw it away, you have planted the seed. So when they go to the supply house to buy a portable generator for whatever reason, hopefully they'll remember that and say, I can't put this inside. I can't put it in my garage, and because of the potential hazard.
You got to keep it away from windows.
And keep it away from windows. I never even, yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
We got David Engelhardt. Let's see, wait. So David Engelhardt says, Irma, September 17, put the primary for my transformer in my backyard for a week plus that I had to keep the grandkids away from. Yeah. So he had a week plus, David. That's just amazing. And then Brian Cole, seems like forever since I've heard Tim's voice. Brian, it would be so nice to get back in person meetings. He says he hears me all the time. He says, but always good. So it's always good, Brian. Thanks for joining in, and thanks, David, for the comments. Please.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And yeah, definitely look forward to the in-person engagement as always.
And I know everybody out there signed up for one of the section meetings. You can still register. The Eastern section starts next week, the end of next week. And then the Western section starts, that's Sunday through Wednesday.
Yes. Yeah.
They overlap just a little bit because the last day of the Eastern section is the day before the Western section, but we have our evenings things on Sunday, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, all right. So, okay, continue, please.
Yeah, no, great discussion. And again, all of that resource information you can find by visiting NEMA's storm disaster resource page. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on, and really this is kind of front and center as well, but as we talk about the devastating impacts of hurricanes and floodings associated therewith, and notably Hurricane Ida that wreaked havoc last week, there's yet another piece that's worthy of discussion, and it directly relates to resiliency. The timing with this is really good because we already have a good case study with Hurricane Ida. And it directly relates to building resiliency into the infrastructure. You recall the catastrophic failure of the levee system in New Orleans 16 years ago when Hurricane Katrina hit. Following that, the federal government spent billions of dollars to upgrade that levee system. As a consequence of that, Hurricane Ida was a major test because it was, Category 4 when it made landfall. But that levee system, as a result of that investment to make it more resilient, it provided far less amount of water damaging, or the far less amount of damage than what we saw with Katrina. So that was an excellent example of how building resiliency into the infrastructure, and quite frankly, we need to make similar investments in our country's electrical infrastructure. Yeah. And I think ultimately, as FEMA is going to be feeding in federal dollars to Louisiana and other states that are impacted. But also what's a topic of discussion right now is that the building infrastructure bill that's currently being discussed at the federal level takes into account to building resiliency into the infrastructure across the country.
And that goes above the minimum requirements that you would see like in the National Electrical Code or a building code. And it could be geographically different. You may do something different here in Weirton, West by God, Virginia, than you would in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania,
Exactly.
or Florida.
Yeah. You know, the challenge with this, and my counterpart in the Northeast, Jack Lyons, he and I had this discussion last week before I had put the information in the article that was published. But and just so you know, Brian was on vacation, so I took the lead with reporting on Hurricane Ida. But, you know, Jack really raised a very valid point. You know, when you think in terms of, you know, making that levee more robust to withstand, you know, the hurricane forces, what do you have with the electrical infrastructure? You have utility poles, not telephone poles, right?
That's right.
So ultimately, you know, that discussion needs to take place. How do you build that infrastructure up on the electrical system? And so another valuable tool that NEMA does have is it's a resilience assessment toolkit. And again, Tom, I don't know if you can pull that up. You know, we can provide the link at the conclusion.
Yeah, I'm looking for it right now. Yep, here it is.
Yeah, this toolkit includes a detailed quick list for government or facility managers to consider resilience planning, assessment, and investment. That quick list is based on another NEMA publication. It's NEMA's Storm Reconstruction Guidebook, Rebuild Smart. It's a free resource and is written to increase awareness for how electrical system resilience can be assessed and to help guide communities on which investments to make to improve resilience. Now, I will say this, as I was tracking the storm and the power outages last week when Ida made her way through the states, is, you know, the concern is, okay, you have all of this damage, and then you have power outage, right? In fact, there was a little over 1 million customers that were without power in Louisiana alone last week. Well, the utility company, they've actually restored a little over half of that. So this morning it was right around 416,000 were still without power. And so there was an article, I forget which publication it was, but there was an article last week where the governor of Louisiana was quoted saying that, you know, based on reports from the utility, in some cases, customers may be without power for up to 30 days. And he said, you know, his comment was, that's not acceptable from the utility. I mean, the utility is saying, yeah, that's not acceptable. He said, I, as the governor, that's not acceptable. And those without power, it's unacceptable. So it's my hope that now maybe this discussion will kind of move its way to the top. And going forward, even though right now the focus is to get power back on, maybe looking down the road at building a more resilient electrical infrastructure may take place. And so that's where kind of hoping that the article that was published last week, maybe the governor gets a hold of that and directs one of their staff to reach out to NEMA for more information.
And you know another part of that, and you know this as well as I do, that a lot of what's driven in our government is driven by people like you and me making a phone call or sending an email saying, hey, I'd like for you to consider something. And that is, you know, advocacy for electrical safety and speaking on behalf of electrical safety and the electrical grid and things of that nature is a good, healthy thing to do. And I know NEMA has a government affairs organization too that works in that area. Is there, I wonder, and maybe that's another good session to have. Might not be appropriate for right now because neither of us are probably up to speed on but I, in my mind, what immediately triggered when you were saying that was, is there a way for somebody to connect with NEMA to know what are the areas, like what you just talked about, that somebody could say, hey, I'm going to write a letter to my congressman or to my governor to say, hey, I'm interested in you supporting something like this. That might be a good session to do with NEMA.
Yeah, definitely. And I would suggest the key contact for that would be Brian Holland,
Okay.
since he deals directly with all the hurricanes that hit the southern region. But maybe it's something that you could bring a couple of us onto the call.
Yeah, we can get all four. We can get all four NEMA field reps.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
That will be a future session. All right, continue, sir.
Well, and that kind of closes it out. What I was going to cover. I know we've still got about 20 minutes left.
Sure.
But
yeah, another. So I was doing some research. Another organization that. So here was. Let me just get this up here, because I threw in a couple other links to this session. Let me grab it here. There is. You've already talked about the storm recovery, but outside FEMA. So FEMA offers some interesting reference materials because, when you're buying a home or something like that, you always want to know, am I in the flood range, right? Or am I in the flood areas? So you're
in all likelihood going to have a floodplain program within the county you reside.
Okay.
And the county will have a floodplain administrator. And so here's the advantage of when you have permitting requirements and inspection.
Okay.
Is ultimately when if you buy a piece of property, when it's surveyed and all that, you're going to know up front whether or not you are in a flood zone area. And if your property is in that flood zone area, then there's going to be requirements that you have to adhere to, whether it's through elevation and so forth.
Yeah, and that was another one that I had. Another organization is the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, FLASH. So you have FEMA, and FEMA does give guidance on talking about flood and water damage and things of that nature. But FLASH, the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, has another one, which is exactly what you just said. They talk about elevating the electrical equipment and getting your electrical equipment. It's the same philosophy that I have from a hazardous locations perspective. If you have a hazardous location, or you and I talked about this in the past with regard to swimming pools, and you have these areas that in a caustic environment, you say, well, don't put the electrical equipment in that room, right?
Yeah.
Put it somewhere.
Save yourself a lot of money by locating it outside that room, or just like with a hazardous classified location, don't put the switch in the class 1, div 1 or div 2 location.
That's right. And if you have a basement, like I'm in a basement now, right? I'm in my basement in my house. Some homes have basements, some of them don't, depending upon the part of the country that you're in. But if you have a basement, you've got to think, what happens if my house does have a flood? Where is my electrical equipment? Do I want to put it in the right location? Maybe you might say, I want to put my panel board in my garage instead of my basement, to avoid the water issues and concerns like that. So there might be conscious decisions that we make, although, and it could be that you're not in a flood zone. But, to our earlier discussion, you never know what's going to happen in your home where you may have water intrusion that you didn't expect. So, being able to say, and that's what this one talks about in now FLASH, just for a perspective, Federal Alliance for Safe Homes is associated with the Institute for Building and Home Safety, and they're associated with the insurance organization. So a lot of the material that you'll see on the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes website will speak to the risk associated with insurance rates, right? So they have in here various resources like around floods. They'll give you tips on the electrical system, which I read through it. It didn't, it's very generic, but good guidance.
Well, but as I read that, Tom,
Yeah,
actually it's aligned with the National Flood Insurance Program.
yeah,
Elevating, I saw in there where it says locate at least 1 foot above the 100-year flood level.
yeah,
And then, you always have to chuckle when somebody says, like, for example, I ran into this when I was an AHJ, although I was not the floodplain administrator. But on occasion, I would get somebody wanting to submit plans to build in the 100-year floodplain. And their rationale was, well, but we had the Great Flood of 1969. I should be good for another 100 years, right? Well,
yeah.
it doesn't quite work that way.
No. No, and David Engelhardt says a CFM is the Certified Floodplain Manager. So at least in his jurisdiction, and it may vary by jurisdiction, but I don't know. It could be that there's an educational program that creates Certified Floodplain Manager. I'm not as familiar with that. Is that a terminology that you would see in every jurisdiction, Tim?
I would say yes, because again, it's ultimately a community participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, so they have to adhere to all of the federal requirements, including, as noted here, building at least 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain. And ultimately, yeah, because now that he kind of sparked my memory there, the planning director in Wayne County, where I was an AHJ, her title was also a certified floodplain manager.
Okay. And then Jody has a question. Does NEMA have any guidance towards floodwater damaged NM conductors and how much conductor needs to be replaced? Is this mainly a local AHJ decision? So, here I'll give my personal history of this, which I didn't call Tim. I did have the water damage report, and I spoke with Dave Mercier, who at the time worked for Southwire. And I explained to him what happened in my house. I had water that came down through the home over my NM wire because it went into my panel board. And his response to me was he wasn't concerned about replacing the equipment because the conductors weren't submersed in water where you would have wicking go up in. So his recommendation to me for my specific problem, which may not align with anybody else's problem out there, was that I didn't have to replace my conductors from the brevity of the water on the conductor, it not being submersed. So what that told me was that the amount of conductor that you may or may not have to replace will vary by application, which I don't believe there's probably any document out there that covers all of those scenarios. I know I'd have to look and see the evaluating equipment damage, what that resource tells us. But I think your earlier comment, Tim, with regard to contacting the manufacturer, like what I did, I contacted a manufacturer for conductors, explained my issue, and they gave me advice on what they would recommend. And really, I mean, if you think about it, it's no one knows for sure, right? I mean, nobody knows 100% with a level of 100% confidence exactly about the replacement. I mean, you just know it's probably impossible to rewiring your entire home, and you want to take what are the precautions that I should take based upon what it experienced. A little water on the outside of the sheath is not going to be the same as taking that conductor and submersing it in water and then removing it, because now water goes up inside the sheath.
Yeah, because ultimately stop and think about the electrical contractor driving the pickup truck that's driving through the rain, and he's got a roll of NM cable in the back of the truck. Yeah, and Jody, that's a great question, and as Tom did an excellent job of covering that, and ultimately, my ultimate recommendation would be to reach out to the wire manufacturer. And as Tom mentioned, really it's going to have to be evaluated on a case by case basis. The only NEMA guidance towards that, and Tom, I don't know if you want to pull up the guide, but right in the table where wire, cable, and flexible cords, wire or cable listed for dry locations, which would be your type NMB, says replace equipment.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's going to be a matter of evaluating how much of that dry location cable has been subjected to the water. Now, it does say refer to section 4.6, and I'm not sure.
Let's go to 4.6.
Let's see what it says.
Yeah, hold on. It is after the table, 4.2. Here it is, 4.6. When any wire,
here we go. Go ahead.
When any wire or cable product is exposed to water, any metallic component such as the conductor metallic sheath or armor is subject to corrosion that can damage the component itself and or cause termination failures. If water remains in medium voltage cable, it could accelerate insulation deterioration, causing premature failure. That's medium voltage. Wire and cable listed only for dry locations may become shock hazard when energized after being exposed to water. We know that one. And it talks about reconditioning wire cable in section 3 are based on the assumption. That's interesting. Maybe we would look at section 3 that the water contains no high concentrations of chemicals, oils, etc. If it is suspected that the water has unusual contaminants, such as flood water, manufacturer should be consulted before any decision is made to continue using any wire cable products.
There's your guidance, Jody.
Yeah.
It's not crystal concrete clear, but ultimately consulting with the cable manufacturer. The other thing is, and Tom had actually touched on this earlier, is other contaminants beside water that are going to be present in flood water. Yeah. There's that risk that you could have accelerated deterioration with that cable.
And I think there is definitely a clear distinction, and I never really thought about it until I talked to David about it, in regard to whether or not you have water, you have a conductor that was submersed. Like if you have a flood and the water level came up high enough that your wires were submersed in
underwater.
Underwater. Now that is a lot different than what I had because I had water flowing over it. And to your point, think about the NM wire on the truck, right? It can get wet on the outside. So no problem, Jody. You are more than welcome, but great question. And questions is what helps programs like this become more valuable. So
absolutely
perfect. So I put a link into FEMA, which if you're navigating around the FEMA website, there are resources on the FEMA website with regard to flooding. And to your point, I never thought about the concept of the generators and also I believe it was, I'm not sure if it was FEMA or if it was Federal Alliance for Safe Homes talked about during these storms, lightning and lightning damage of equipment and lightning strikes, right? I chuckled, but I shouldn't. There was a comment on there that says it's a fallacy that lightning never strikes the same place twice, because if you get hit once, it's not like you're out of the woods, so to speak, right? You could still have that same lightning because you've created that charged environment. But in any case, lightning could strike twice in the same spot. And I'm sure if I was outside, I would get hit twice. That's my luck. So FEMA and Federal Alliance for Safe Homes is another great one. They do a lot of tracking because it's insurance driven, right? And there was an interesting, they have a tool on there that tells you the amount of cost of damage based upon the number of inches of water that are in the house and based upon the size of the home, which was interesting. And I think about my house. I'm not. I couldn't tell you how many square foot it is, but I know we were at least into about $80,000 or up over $100,000 because it was like $30,000 just to dry the house out. I mean, that was and then they had to cut drywall up I think 2 feet on the walls and expose all of that, and then some of my external walls they had to replace insulation. It was expensive. It was thank God I had coverage, and I'm not ashamed to say State Farm Help was just a blessing for me in my experience there. So
is that an insurance commercial you just
and I tell you what, I here's the thing, Tim. Here's the thing. When you are in that state of looking at your houses totally in your mind destroyed, and then you get the question of, was it frozen pipes, or was this? And this is a plug for hiring professionals to do the work, because when you do it yourself, if I would have screwed it up, if I would have screwed something up in the plumbing to cause that, my insurance company would have said, sorry, yeah, poor maintenance, or you created this problem type of deal. And I'm sure you can squeeze something, but due to the fact it was frozen pipes, and that was my saving grace. So just the word out there on why you should always hire a professional to do your electrical work, plumbing work, whatever it is, because they're gonna do it right, and it's worth paying them to do that. There's things you do on your own. There's things you don't do. What I also like is on these reference materials, Tim, you have them in Spanish as well. So you've got English and Spanish available for most of the reference materials that are out there. And I think and I'm not sure.
Don't ask me to translate. I don't speak Spanish, at least not yet.
No hable español?
Yep. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Nein sprechen. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tell you what, the other thing is that, so here's the other, there are probably a lot of people outside of the United States that will be watching this. And for those individuals, the basis of all of this still apply, because electricity and electrical equipment, they may be listed to a different standard, right? But the laws of physics don't change. The fact that these residues and whatnot can damage equipment, it doesn't change regardless of what part of the world you are in. So these resources can be used throughout. So just some words of wisdom. Wow, I think we look at that. You said, I don't think we're going to have enough material for 30 minutes. Never underestimate the chat box and the journey of a conversation.
Yeah,
amazing.
And it was a good conversation, and want to thank everybody that sat in and listened to Tom and I today. It was a great discussion, and thanks again for all the great questions, and hello to Dave Clemens.
Yeah.
Hope all is well at your end, and look forward to seeing Jody and some of the others maybe on the call here in a couple of weeks at the Western Section meeting. It'll be a good meeting.
Yes, and hopefully we'll see people who watch this program and other IAEI events, which, of course, I'd be amiss if I did not remind everybody that there is a analysis of changes today from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock Eastern with Jimmy Rogers, talking about analysis. I believe this is of the 2020 code changes, I'm assuming, with the IAEI. And there's a lot of other great online resources for education through the IAEI. Don't forget to subscribe to the IAEI's YouTube channel. Don't forget to become a member. Go out to their IAEI.org website and check out the online training resources. CEU credits are provided. Like this session is 1 hour, 2 to 3. They give you 0.1 CEU credits. And I'm telling you what, they have a great, I call it a smorgasbord, right? It's like a buffet where you can just go out there, take a look at the topics that are going to be talked about. And these are the leading, and Jimmy Rogers is chair of panel 4, right? So the IAEI leverages some really great individuals to provide educational materials and teach on code changes and other electrical safety and application of electrical products and solutions. So great reference for you, and it's on demand. It's you don't have to travel, and you can still get an education from your seat. So wherever you
Yeah,
are.
and I'll add this: the IAEI has a lot of horsepower with its instructors. How's that? Pun intended.
Unintended. I like it. Excellent. And Felix Sandoval, thanks for joining in from Colombia, South America, and Jody Wages. Vince Delacroche, thank you, sir, my
Thanks,
Siemens
Vince.
counterpart. Thanks for
Felix.
joining in. And Vince will be presenting, I think, at the Western section, if I'm not mistaken, or is it the Southern section? I can't remember. I can't even remember my own programs. David Engelhart, Jody Wages, David Clements, Vince Delacroche, William Snyder, everybody out there, thank you all for joining. Thanks for what you do for the electrical industry and electrical safety. Thank you, Mr. McClintock. Take care, and thanks for giving us your time. We have exceeded our 1 hour limit. So everybody, see you next Tuesday. Next Tuesday is going to be a recorded session. So it'll be a broadcast, a premiere event. So stay tuned and watch out for that one on Tuesday at noon next week. All right. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everyone.
All righty. Take care, everybody.